The idea of Venice protesting the super rich is a bit of a laugh and ridiculous. Furthermore, the idea that sort of foreigners are sort of ruining and taking over Venice. I mean, it was always the world's most international city.
Hello and welcome back to the Americano Show. Last night in New York, Democratic voters elected as their candidate for the mayoral election in New York a socialist candidate called Zohrab Mamdani. But the very richest New Yorkers will not be too concerned about that because their minds are on the biggest wedding of the summer for the oligarch class, which is Jeffrey Bezos's upcoming nuptials to Lauren Sanchez.
Jeffrey Bezos, Jeffrey Bezos, Jeffrey Bezos. Oh, Jeffrey Bezos, Jeffrey Bezos, Jeffrey Bezos. You did it.
This wedding is taking place in Venice, and there have been some protests about it from the Venetians, who are pretty upset at what they regard as yet another incursion on their city. But as Owen Matthews, our Rome correspondent, writes for the magazine recently, Venice has always been a city for super rich incursions, has it not, Owen?
Well, it's sort of ironic, actually, that to have Venetians protesting oligarchy, because the city was built by the most ruthless oligarchs in the history of capitalism.
Yes.
They were far more rapacious than anything that Jeff Bezos had dreams in his wildest dreams. And furthermore, I mean, the palazzi of Venice on the Grand Canal are, in fact, totally literally private entertainment complexes. They're just multi-story ballrooms with some bedrooms in the attic. So the idea of Venice protesting the super rich is a bit of a laugh and ridiculous. Furthermore, the idea that sort of foreigners are sort of ruining and taking over Venice. I mean, it was always the world's most international city, or the Europe's most international city. It was like the Dubai of the late Middle Ages and early modern period. It was created by the currents of capitalism and the currents of the world. And it was always the city in Europe where new fashion and new language and new ideas came to Venice, because it was a maritime trading empire. So in fact, I think there could be nothing more traditionally Venetian than oligarchs partying in Venice. Those are all very, very traditional Venetian things.
Yes, and the Venetian economy is very much driven by tourism. And as you said, historically by prostitution. Prostitutes for the very rich who are visiting Venice.
Yes, that's true. In a census in the middle of the 18th century, about 10% of the population were officially registered prostitutes. Yeah. So, and the Venetians that are protesting, there are very few Venetians. There are about, they claim to be, there's different estimates, but basically it's well under 50,000. And the ones that are revolting are basically the group that protested against Bezos, and yesterday they put out a gigantic placard, which can only be seen from the top of the bell tower of St. Mark's Cathedral, saying, Jeff Bezos, if you can afford to hire Venice, you can afford to pay more taxes, like sort of, ooh. But actually it was not supported by like a sea of humanity. Yes. It was supported by like sort of 35 people. So it was not exactly a sort of gigantic uprising against Bezos.
Yes. Is it because of a sort of global dislike of Amazon? Is that where this hatred for Bezos in particular seems to come from?
If you enjoy what we do here at Spectator TV, then why not subscribe to the magazine as well? Right now, you can get 12 weeks for just £12 and we'll throw in a free bottle of Pimm's plus a Spectator picture. Go to spectator.co.uk/summer25. This is a UK-only offer.
Yeah, well, let me tell you like the bio of one of the major sort of protesters. So this woman, Marina Sottariva, who was quoted in The Guardian and is on telly a lot, she was the one that's at the forefront. She's also the head of the Lagoon Pride celebrations, and the group that did the poster stunt is actually called We Hate Elon. So protesting Bezos. So they because there's so few Venetians and relatively few things to protest about. They actually sort of cover a broad range of every possible thing you could possibly protest about. Whether it's like capitalism, Elon, Jeff because he happens to be in town, yes. Pride. It's the same rather tiny group of professional protesters, Venetian protesters that sort of cover all the bases. They're stretched thin.
Yes. Well, oddly, it is a kind of snobbery that hates tourism, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned that historically Venice has probably had more visitors than it does now. But for a lot of people visiting Venice, they just see the masses of tourists and they feel disgusted.
Well, that's true. Well, it's not that there's been more visitors before. I think there's probably more visitors now than there ever have been. But if you break it down, if you break the numbers down, the peak numbers of tourists are about 120,000 a day. If you add the notional residents of 40,000, that's 160,000. But actually, in 1571, the population was about 170,000. So there's actually fewer human beings in Venice today than there were in the 16th century. I'm not sure that's true of any other place in the world. I mean, any other capital city. I mean, I think there's not. Anyway, this is there's not fewer people in London than there were in the 16th century. There's definitely more people in London. So your point about snobbery, yes, it's true. Venetians, I think today, the remaining Venetians are a sort of beleaguered bunch. And some of the things they protest about, I don't want to be too rude about them, because actually there are things like sort of local artisanal shops that are being taken over by sort of generic gift shops. They're selling sort of Chinese masks. That's actually really upsetting and sad that there's no grocery shops. There's almost no sort of bakers and things. So the nuts and bolts of daily life in Venice is actually becoming increasingly difficult and falling apart. So in that sense, they do have a point. But on the other hand, what can be done about that? I personally have a cunning plan. If anyone's actually listening, if they actually want to populate Venice like tomorrow and fill by the way, 1,000 empty council properties that need to be that are unrefurbished, they should actually create sort of Ireland-style tax-free zone for artists. How about that? Move to Venice, pay no income tax.
Well,
it would be full tomorrow. Like 100,000 people would move there.
Amsterdam had similar problems in the 70s, and they made there was lots of derelict housing on the river. And they said you can have it for a very small price. I think it was even like whatever it was, whatever the Dutch currency was. I can't even remember. And they said you have it, and then it's your obligation to maintain and do up the property.
Well, that's true, but you need to have something for these people to do.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's the same as the €1 houses in Sicily.
Yeah,
you can buy a house for €1 in Sicily, but you have to commit to putting 20,000 euros into doing it up.
Yeah.
But what will you then do in your little sort of house in central Sicily, because there's no economy there?
Yeah.
That's why I say art.
Yeah,
because art doesn't really require any infrastructure. You have your studio, you do your art. It doesn't require any actually.
Yes.
And Venice is actually quite well supported for like art type activities. So and Ireland, of course, famously for many years had no artists paid no income tax, including recording artists like you two.
Yes.
So they could change the demographics if they wanted to, and those people would bring families and schools would stay open and that kind of thing. But no one's actually really interested in that, because everyone's too interested in making money off the tourists.
Quite. But I'd like this municipal plan of yours, Owen. It's building a creative hub, a new creative
hub. Why not?
In Venice. The New York Times, I read yesterday, has done a slightly snotty piece about Jeffrey Bezos' wedding, calling it, and Lauren Sanchez's wife, calling her tacky. Oh. And I mean, obviously, the New York Times has some animus against Jeffrey Bezos, owner of the Washington Post. Probably the second most important newspaper in America after the New York Times. But there does seem to be this Hollywood interest in Venice as a place. George Clooney married
George
there.
and Amal, 2014. That was like definitively not tacky.
Not tacky.
That was
Yeah.
like super classy.
Super
But
classy.
I think George is super classy.
A lot of people think that.
Amal is as well. I mean, he's just like a very smooth operator. I think Jeff is basically a sort of geek, sort of reborn as a billionaire, and and he's been going to the gym, as everyone has observed. I mean, he's looking amazingly buff.
Yes.
So I think he's sort of trying to sort of cosplay a Hollywood star, but maybe and we haven't really seen exactly how it's going to play out because they're full nuptials and have not quite unfolded yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, one person's tacky is the other person's sort of glamour.
Well, yes, and there's some people seem to think that Lauren is, by owning her tackiness, she is actually creating her own new style, because she appeared at the inauguration wearing sort of lingerie, and she's got this face, this extraordinary what they call Mar-a-Lago face, which is where you have so much plastic surgery.
She's had work done. Yeah, she has.
But it's almost deliberately shocking. It's almost a Frankensteinization of herself.
Nice.
That some people think is stylish in a way.
Well, I think Jeff is just he's very. He's on message. He wants to be, in the currents of the world, and I think, this is. Trophy wives have always had a look. I mean, if you look at 80s, trophy wives look like Ivana Trump. That was the thing you got. You got the big hair, the sort of the sort of protruding bust and that kind of thing. I mean, I think there's every age throws up its own ideal of trophy beauty. Lauren is the belle du jour.
Well, yes, and Anna Wintour put her on the cover of Vogue, as she did with Ivana Trump back in the day. So we're on point with our sense of fashion. Owen, thank you very much for coming into
My great
Spectator.
pleasure.
Lovely to see you.